Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures with Andi. Today we're going to be dyeing yarn as part of the ChemKnits June 2020 dye-along. Each month the ChemKnits YouTube channel does this, where she posts an inspiration photo and invites other people to dye yarn inspired by that photo. Then she does a live stream where she dyes her own yarn inspired by that photo. And later on she posts a wrap-up video where she shows the results of what she dyed, along with pictures of what some other people dyed as well as part of the dye-along. So that's what we're going to do today. Since June is Pride Month, this is the picture that ChemKnits chose. It is a rainbow of artist chalks or possibly artist pastels, but it's a rainbow because June is Pride Month. So we're definitely going to be dyeing some rainbows today. But June also has Juneteenth and the anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, which I'm ashamed to say that at almost 50 years old, I had not heard of either of those until recently and didn't know what they were. If you haven't, I urge you to go read about them. So I also wanted to dye yarn to honor the Black community and the struggles that they've had and that they still have. I wanted to dye yarn for both of these communities that I care about so much and that I support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dye a skein of Cascade Yarns 128 Superwash, and I'm going to dye half of it black using Wilton's black icing gel food color, and the other half I'm going to dye rainbows using different colors of Wilton's icing gels in rainbow shades. And this is not going to be easy, because if you've done any yarn dyeing yourself with food coloring, or if you've read up about it, watched videos, then you know that it's pretty much impossible to dye yarn a true black using food color. That's because black food coloring is actually made of multiple different pigments, and when you dye yarn with it, those pigments tend to separate. So instead of getting a black color, you get those other pigments instead. You can get like a really dark purple, but to get an actual true black is pretty much impossible. So that's going to be really hard to do, but I am going to try as hard as I can. And the other half I'm going to hand paint the rainbow on, which is something I've never done before. So that's going to be, I've never hand painted yarn before, and I've certainly never hand painted stripes before. So that's going to be tough for me to do, just because it's something new to do, but also because to set that I have to steam it. And I've got to find a way to steam the rainbow half without causing problems with the black half of the yarn's color, without any of the colors bleeding onto each other on the rainbow half, without any other colors in the yarn anywhere bleeding on each other. So that's going to be hard, but again, I'm going to try as hard as I can to do it. And it seems kind of appropriate that this is going to be a difficult skein of yarn for me to dye, because both of these communities have had a really hard time fighting for, and still have a hard time fighting for the same rights that cis-het white people like me get by default. So it seems appropriate that this is going to be a difficult skein for me to dye, because for me, this is just art, but for them, it's their lives. So to everyone in the Black community, Black Lives Matter. To everyone in the white community, let me say this loud so you hear, Black Lives Matter. To everyone in the LGBTQIA+ community, I love you, I support you. To everyone in the cis-het community, love is love, and we need to accept that. We all need to accept Black Lives Matter and love is love. And to the people in those communities, I just want you to know that I love you and I support you 100%. So let's go dye some yarn. Okay, so here I have the yarn. This is a skein of Cascade 128 100% superwash wool. It is 100 grams and it is 100% superwash merino. So I have soaked this half of it in just tap water. The other half I've put in a Ziploc bag and zipped that bag down as tight as I could. And then I put a silicone zip tie around it and tightened that down as much as I could. And the reason for that is to try to keep this yarn that's in the bag from getting any of the dye, the black dye, on it, so that it's still white for when I hand paint the rainbow on it. So it is still theoretically dry. There's some water on the outside of the bag, but nothing on the yarn, I don't think. So hopefully this will work. I've added silicone zip tie here to make it easier for me, so hopefully that I won't get it tangled. Now, in the crock pot here, this is just plain water. It is just cool room temperature water. There is no vinegar in it. And the reason for that is that if I put vinegar in it, it's going to make the dye strike more quickly. So that as the black food coloring separates into its different components, I'll end up getting some spots that are red, some that are blue, some that are purple, maybe even some green, depending on what colors they use in the dye. And that's what I want to avoid. So by doing it with no acid, it's going to strike more slowly, so that hopefully I can get more of a blended color and try to get that black color to it. And doing it cold for the immersion also gives it more time to pick up that color and get it more separated out more evenly before I set it with the heat. So I've got 6 cups of just plain water in the crock pot, and over here this is 2 cups of water with 1/4 teaspoon of Wilton's Icing Gel black food color in it. And the foam bubbles are on the top because I did go ahead and I got one of these, this little mixer to mix it up with, because I was solar dyeing some yarn the other day and I had trouble getting it to mix up too. And those, I found those online, and so I got one for mixing up food coloring dye when I'm dyeing yarn to make it a little bit easier. And I got one for in the kitchen too. So I also got an apron for when I'm dyeing, because when I was doing that solar dyeing, when I was trying to mix up that food coloring, I managed to get food color all over me. So, and please ignore that sound. That's just my cameraman tripping over things on the floor. Don't worry, he's okay. You okay, Chad? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so I am going to do this, pouring this dye into the food bath in different sections, which is kind of called space dyeing. Has nothing to do with astronomy, but that'll just help it get all over the dye, all over the yarn. So I'm going to put in half of it right now. I also got tongs. See, I am slowly figuring out how to do this. And I am just going to let this sit in this cool bath right now. You can see already how it just sort of looks kind of more of a purple than black, and obviously it's just still picking up the dye. I do not want this dip dyeing, but it wouldn't pick anything up. It wouldn't set right now anyway, because it has no acid in here and it has no heat. And I'm just checking to see if, yeah, I think that resist from that silicone tie is keeping any of the dye from getting up into the yarn that's in the bag. If it does happen to, I'll figure something out. I'll figure it out. So I am going to let this just sit with that half of the dye in this crock pot for probably about an hour with no heat, no acid, just the cold water and the dye. And then I'll come back and see about adding the rest of the dye. And the reason that I'm doing it for an hour is for two parts. One, because it is cold immersion and it's just going to take longer, but also because I'm going to go grab some lunch and it's going to take me an hour for lunch. So I'll be back in an hour, take a look at the dye, take a look at the yarn and the dye, see how it's going, and see about adding the rest of this food color in there. Okay, so the yarn's been soaking in this dye bath for actually a little over an hour because I went out and checked the mail and checked the blueberry bushes to see if there's any blueberries ready to harvest. There weren't. Chipmunk keeps outwitting us on that one. So let's take a look at the yarn and see how it's doing. It's looking pretty good, but you can see how instead of a black, it's more of kind of a reddish purple color. And if you look up here where that resist is, you can see the breaking, where it's breaking the color. And obviously the dye bath hasn't even come close to exhausting. You can see all that blue in there still. And that's because we have no acid in there. So I'm going to put this back in here. I'm going to pour the rest of the dye in the bath. Even though it hasn't exhausted, I still want to get the rest of this dye in here because what I want to try to do is layer over the color that's on the yarn now with other shades so that the parts that are more reddish now, try to layer over that and try to get the blues and the greens in there so that what we eventually come up with over the course of multiple dyeing stages is closer to a true black. And so far the dye that I've gotten here, it was just 1/4 cup, oh my goodness, 1/4 teaspoon of the Wilton's food coloring and 2 cups of water. So it's not really a ton of dye yet, but you can see how adding that dye in, we don't have just the blue now. We're back to more of a black again. Got that all mixed up in there good. And I'm going to let this go ahead and sit for another hour just in the dye bath with it cold and no acid. And then I'm going to come back and I'll add the acid in and turn the heat on to see about setting it and let it go ahead and exhaust the rest of that bath. So we will see you back in an hour. All right, so our yarn has been in the cool dye bath for another hour, and let's take a look at it. It is getting darker. Of course, it's important to remember that yarn looks darker when it's wet than what it'll look when it's dry. Looking kind of a purpley color to me. Let's take a look at our dye bath, which obviously is not going to be exhausted at this point. And yeah, again, you can see it's It's the blue. It's kind of a purplish color, but it's a lot of the blue, which just is not striking at this point, and that's to be expected because blue takes longer to strike than red. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of vinegar. Not as much as I normally would, because I want this to be a very slow take-up process so we can layer those colors over. And I'm also going to start going ahead and applying some heat. So I'm going to put just 1 tablespoon of vinegar in. And this is a 1/2 tablespoon measuring spoon, so one over here and one over here. And as I do this, I will gradually add in more vinegar and, if necessary, more dye as well. Keep layering these colors over this yarn and get it as close to black as we can. So go ahead and turn it on. I've got it set to high. I'm going to keep an eye on it and see how hot it gets. I don't want it to get too terribly hot just yet. But I'm going to let this sit here, see how long it takes before it starts to really exhaust, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. All right, so it's been another 15 minutes. Well, total it's been a 1/2 hour since I added in any of the vinegar. And let's take a look at this. Yeah, that's a lot lighter blue than what it was. I don't expect it to have exhausted at this point. And you'll notice my little setup here, I had to do because I put the lid on the crock pot and it pinched the bag between the crock pot and the lid and it melted it. I'm like, no! So just to be on the safe side, I went ahead and just put that there to make sure that it didn't melt anything else. So let's take a look at our yarn. That is going to be a really nice color. And down here. We do have a lot of color still in the bath. And if I look at it closely up here, I can see red on the outside of the skein. And yeah, down here you can see some breaking where we've got the blue. So that's what we want to try to cover over. I'm going to make sure these ties aren't too tight. These are the ties that came with it, so they're a little bit tighter. I want to make sure there's not any resist to that, or to the ones that I added either, for that matter. And no, this water is not particularly hot, but still, don't try this at home. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of the dye. This is another 1/4 teaspoon of dye. This is just in 1 cup of water instead of filling it up to the top of the mason jar, which is 2 cups, because I've already got a total of 8 cups of liquid in here already, and I don't want to overflow things. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the dye in, and you can see the froth from where I used my little mixer to mix it up. And just like I did before, I'm going to put some over here and some over here. I'm going to use my tongs just to stir it up a little bit. And yeah, our dye bath is now back to that really dark. And you can see it's much more of a purple than a black. Even when you get just a little bit, it's kind of like a navy bluish purple. But we will go ahead and we're going to let this go for a little while. I'm going to set this back up again so that it holds my yarn. And I've got all of the yarn that I'm wanting to dye submerged. I went ahead and I turned the heat back down to warm. It was on hot for most of this, but I turned it back down to warm. And I'm going to see how it goes on warm for about 15 minutes. And if I need to, I'll go ahead and turn it back up to hot again. And keep an eye on this until I decide I want to add some more vinegar in here to try to go ahead and exhaust the rest of the bath. So we'll be back. Okay, so it's been a half an hour since I put the rest of the dye in. And we are down to just blue in the dye bath, which is not surprising because, as we know, red strikes faster than blue. And let's take a look and see what we got in here. I do have this still on warm. I haven't turned it up to hot. And yeah, this is looking really good. I do see just this red haze on it. That's because the blue hasn't struck yet, but it's looking pretty good. Some of my yarn is possibly pulling out of there, but okay, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and put some more vinegar in here. So that's 2 tablespoons, 4 half tablespoons. Make sure that vinegar's all stirred up in there really good. Put my yarn back in there. And again, I'm going to leave it on warm. And I'll keep checking it until it looks like the dye bath is exhausting really good. So I did want to show you real quick, if you look at my apron here, this is where I've been just wiping up the dye off of my desk where I've spilled it. And you can see what I'm talking about, how the black food coloring just separates out into its component parts. You've got this, I just wiped it up straight, and it's already separated into red here, and then around on the edges, the blue. I did look up, and the Wilton's Black Icing Gel food color is red, blue, and 2 types of yellow. I don't remember off the top of my head which one, and obviously I don't know the amounts of them. So, but yeah, that's what I mean when I say that it breaks into its component colors. So, all right, we're gonna let this sit for a while and we'll be back. All right, so it's been another half hour since I put those other 2 tablespoons of vinegar in, and let's take a look at things. And it's still got quite a bit of color. Some places where you can see where it's exhausting, but others where we still have a lot of color in here. Let's take a look at yarn. And it really is looking pretty dark. Still got that red sheen to it though. I did turn the heat back up to high. Look at this. I mean, we're not doing too terribly bad. So I think one more tablespoon of vinegar. And that should get us close to exhausted. Yeah, we can see it's really, really close to exhausted, even just with just that little bit. So let's give it another 15 minutes and see where we are. Okay, so it's been another 15 minutes since we added that vinegar and turned the heat up. Oh yeah, that's almost completely exhausted. There's just the faintest blue. Same for over here. Let's take a look at our yarn. I'm going to turn the heat down because the Ziploc bag was just laying on the edge of this after I turned the heat up, and it melted it again. Luckily, so far, it does not appear to have melted it into my yarn, which is good. So yeah, this is looking really good. Bearing in mind, of course, that it's going to look lighter when it dries, but this is a good start at least. Put this back in there. And I went ahead and there's only so much dye that yarn can take up. There's only so many places that chemical bond can occur. So if you've taken up all of those places and you've still got dye in your bath and you manage to exhaust the dye bath, it can be not that the dye has bonded to the yarn, but just that you've got dye particles just kind of stuck to the yarn, so that when you wash your yarn, you get lots of bleeding. I don't want that to happen because that's really annoying. So I've taken another skein of the Cascade 128 and I soaked it just in some plain water as a yarn mop. And I did the same thing with it as I did with our first skein, where I've got it half and half with half of it in a baggie. So I'm going to put this in here with our other skein so that if there are some just loose dye particles in there, and with our main skein of yarn, it'll grab those and it will actually bond with them and get dyed by them, instead of them just being loose in this other skein of yarn. So I'm going to let this just sit like this. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the heat off completely because it's really pretty warm right now. Warm enough. I'm not going to add any more vinegar to it. It doesn't need any more acid. And I'm just going to let it sit like this and let this grab all of that. And yeah, you can see just putting that yarn mop in there, it's almost completely grabbed all of that dye already. Move it over to the other side in case there's anything hiding over there. And I have a second tong for it. Luckily my tongs came in a 2-pack. Yay! So I'm just gonna let them sit in this dye bath until it completely cools. I'm gonna go grab some dinner, and I may just let this actually cool overnight like this. I know I definitely want to let it cool overnight. So it may be tomorrow morning when we come back and take a look at this and see how it's doing. So I'll see you guys later. All right, so it's the next morning and the yarn is still damp, but it's dried quite a lot. And looking at it under the light, it actually looks more like a really deep, rich, sort of sable brown. Chad described it as what a Havana cat looks like, which is just this really gorgeous brown. But I do still want to try for black, so I am not giving up yet. I think part of what's making it look more brown than black is the red, which is just sort of almost glazed on the outside. So I went ahead and I mixed up some green, and you can see that I used my little mixer on it because wow, that's some foam. That's gonna be great to use in the kitchen. Not the one I use for dye though. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in my crock pot. And this is just a 1/4 teaspoon of the Wilton Kelly Green. And the reason that I'm using green is because, as I mentioned before, the Wilton's black is made of red, blue, and yellow. And since we're wanting to layer this over with colors to keep that red from taking over, I'm going with green, which is of course yellow and blue. And that foam will eventually dissipate. And the water is currently cold. I haven't turned on the crock pot yet. But I'm going to do that now. Turn it over to warm again so that it takes up the dye really slowly. And I'm just going to let this sit. I might end up turning the heat up to high for a little bit. We'll see how that goes. But I'm just going to let this sit while I go finish my morning cup of coffee. And we'll come back, take a look at how it looks, and see if we're any closer to true black. Okay, so I let the yarn sit in that green on warm, and it was in there for, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 hours. And when the dye bath was almost completely exhausted, when it was just the palest hint of blue, I went ahead and put the yarn mop back in there. And I think we are doing really good as far as the black goes. I mean, it is a much darker color. It looks like we've gotten rid of that sort of red glaze that was on the outside. It's still slightly damp, so it could lighten up as it dries. As we know, things are darker when they're wet than when they're dry, so it might lighten up some. I might decide to go back in and add another layer of color over the top of things. But for right now, I am happy with where this is. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to dyeing the rainbow half. And I've got things laid out here. These zip ties are not here for adding resist. They're just to help me remember and know where to change from one color to the next. These are all, again, Wilton's Icing Gel food colors. We've got No Taste Red, Lemon Yellow, Kelly Green, teal, royal blue, and violet. And you'll notice I skipped over the orange because there is no orange in the Wilton Icing Gel food color kit that I've got. So instead what I did for that, all of the other colors are 1/4 teaspoon of the icing gel. So for the orange, I combined obviously red and yellow to make the orange. It is just under 1/8 teaspoon of the red and 3/8 of a teaspoon of the yellow, and I think we got a pretty nice looking orange. It might look a little bit reddish in the jar, but this is what all the colors look like just on a washcloth. So I'm going to start painting these, and I am actually going to paint this time with a paintbrush. I've got a jar of clear water, of just plain tap water as well, to rinse my paintbrush out. So at this point, let's just go ahead, dive in, and start painting. And the yarn where we're going to be painting our rainbow, I don't want to drip on anything, I soaked it in water that was 8 cups water with 3 tablespoons of vinegar. And I just soaked it while I was mixing up all of this dye. And then wrung out the excess water. So it is damp. Okay, so now that I've got all of the colors on the top side of this, I'm going to flip it over. I'm also going to take these silicone zip ties out because all they were doing was just telling me where the different colors started and stopped. And when I flip it over, I'm going to be able to tell that. So I'm not going to need these as a visual guide. And I'll actually make things a little bit easier for me not having them there. And I don't know if you noticed when I was painting them how I kept picking the yarn up and dabbing underneath it. That wasn't to pick up any excess dye. That was to pick up excess water. What was underneath it, you can even see here. This is just plain water. And I just don't want that there to have the yarn just on top of that. Because I don't want it causing problems with anything absorbing dye. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over now. And you can see that, yeah, on this side, we've got lots of areas of white. Which is to be expected. But I'm going to go ahead and put the colors on this side, and I'm going to go ahead and do some touch-ups here where that black spread out and the colors broke on that. Go ahead and touch that up, both with the colors that lead into it and also with other colors as necessary to layer that color up to get it to black. Sort of like what we did with the kettle dyeing, only I'm doing it hand painted to get it there and to get it to all blend in. And I'm going to do that and then check through, see if there's anything else that I need to touch up any color on, and then I'll be ready to wrap it up and steam it to set everything. So I'm going to go ahead and speed the video up now and we'll get to it.
Okay, now that I've got all the dye on the yarn, I just need to steam it to set it. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because normally when people do this, they use saran wrap so that they can seal the saran wrap all around. They don't have to worry about the colors mixing. But I don't like using saran wrap because it's a single-use item that just goes into the landfill. So we really don't use saran wrap if at all possible here in our house. So instead, I've got a shower curtain that I've cut into pieces. That's what's been underneath my yarn here. And I'm going to see if I can use it to section these off. Now the yarn has actually been sitting here for a while after I finished getting the dye on. I went downstairs and had some dinner. For those who are keeping track of time, it is a little after 9 o'clock now. On day 2 of this yarn dyeing adventure. Okay, so that's that one. Okay, so I've got my crock pot here with just a little bit of water in it, just to protect this plastic from the bottom so that it doesn't melt. This is thicker plastic than the zipper bags that I was using earlier, so it hopefully shouldn't melt, but just to be on the safe side so it's not laying flat against the bottom in here to give it some protection, I've got just a little bit of water in there. So I'm going to put the lid on this, and I've got it set to high, and I'm going to let it sit in the crock pot on high for 15-20 minutes or so. Then I'm going to turn the crock pot off, unplug it, go to bed, let it cool overnight, and I will get up in the morning, rinse it, and see how it looks. So I will talk to y'all then. So here is our finished skein. I think it turned out wonderful. I'm really happy with how this looks. The black is a nice, deep, rich shade. For comparison, this is a skein of Barocco Vintage in black, and this is a commercially dyed skein. This is our skein that we did with food coloring, and yeah, I'd say we definitely got just a really lovely deep shade of black.
I love how the rainbow turned out, how the colors all just merged together, and even how within each color you get some variation of that shade, which I think just really speaks to how everyone has their own uniqueness. So I love that part of it. And of course, our swatch, which I think speaks for itself. All in all, I'm really glad that I did this project. It took me several days to do this. Normally I can dye the colors of a skein of yarn in a couple of hours, but the black alone took close to 3 days. The rainbow took hours to paint because I wanted to get those colors right. And the whole time that I worked on this yarn, normally when I dye yarn or do any of these other adventures, it's just fun for me. And I just jump into it with just joy and happiness and silliness and all that. But with this project, when I was working on it, I kept in mind everyone in these two communities and the struggles that they have had that I will never fully understand. The things that they've had to fight for, the rights, the equality, the fair treatment, just being able to live their lives in peace that I get by default. And it was a very powerful and important thing for me to do personally. I still have a lot to learn. Learning is a lifetime process, and though I have learned and grown about everything I know about the struggles that the Black community has had, that the LGBTQIA plus community has had, that the BIPOC community and so many other marginalized groups have had, I've learned a lot more than I knew when I was younger. I've learned a lot more than I knew 5 years ago, a year ago, and I know that there is a lot more that I still have to learn. And I'm going to keep pushing myself to learn more, to understand more. And most importantly, I'm going to keep standing up for everyone in these marginalized groups and fighting for them to have the rights that I get by default. I'm going to fight for them to not have to fear for their lives just because of who they are, to not have to struggle to get just on the same equal footing as cis het white people like me. So that is my promise. I'm going to keep working to learn and grow, to learn better, to do better, and to be better, and to keep fighting and supporting everyone in the Black community and the LGBTQIA community. And I think I will probably come back and revisit this project, whether it's dyeing yarn, painting, sculpting, I'm not sure yet, but I think every June I'm going to come back and revisit this project because I think it was a week well spent just thinking about this. So it's something I encourage and invite all of you to do. Just take some time and just go out and read things from people in these communities and learn things that you didn't know before and just think about it. Black Lives Matter. Love is love. Take care, everyone.